Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Taboo with Mimi. Today, I'm coming back with a very important solo episode. Why is this important? Because we're going to talk about something that touches me deeply and it's also very personal. But this one, it's painful too. This is painful emotionally because I am part of the problem. I'm going to talk about colonialism.
Hi, and welcome to Taboo with Mimi, the podcast that talks about anything and everything, really, that is taboo in this world. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No. But seriously, I go around the world because I'm a digital nomad and I interview people from different cultures and ask them about their taboos. Why? Because it's time to talk about them. Some things will hopefully make you think. Others will maybe gross you out. But most things will be something you can relate to. So there you have it. Welcome to Taboo with Mimi.
I'm not an historian, so I'm not going to go over the whole history of colonialism. However, I am three very important things. First of all, I'm white, I'm Western, and I'm European. And therefore, in my opinion, I have some privilege. I have white privilege, I have money privilege, I have education privilege. I have a lot of privileges. I was born with privilege, and I am here to recognize it. I'm also white. I'm a white person in the world where white people have power and control. And I'm Italian. I'm Italian, a first world nation in Europe, a nation that has colonized a lot of countries in Africa during the 20th century. And it's definitely not my fault, but that has happened. My nation has done that before. Beyond that, I also hold an Israeli passport. And if you follow anything that is going on right now in the Middle East, a lot of people say that Israel is a colonizing power because it is basically occupying a land where there's other people. Of course, that is a bigger debate because the Jews do say they're native to the land and therefore you cannot colonize the land and blah, blah, blah. But also the third layer of my life, which is why I've decided to talk about this today, is that I live in Bali. And I don't only live in Bali as a white person, I also live long-term in Bali. And I have decided to build a house in Bali because I love the place so much. And therefore, for me, it's like it's time to sit for a second and think about what it means to colonize a place. Why is this bad? What are the consequences? And is it bad necessarily? Or do we do it regardless? Is it inevitable? I'm going to go over it as I'm trying to also unpack with you a lot of the guilt that has basically taken over my life that I've been feeling because I love the place that I'm living, which is Bali, so much. And because it is so problematic that I'm living there. And why is this so problematic? And why is it such a problem that actually a lot of people decide to live there long term? And what can we do to actually make it better if there is an option? So basically, I just want to start by going over a little definition. And by that, I'm just, taking the National Geographic. And it briefly says that colonialism is defined as, and I'm quoting, control by one power over a dependent area or people. It occurs when one nation subjugates another, conquering its population and exploiting it, often while forcing its own language and cultural values upon its people. This is the main definition of colonialism. And that, what is an example of colonialism here? It says like the long control exercised, for example, by the British Empire over much of North America, parts of Africa, and India. Colonialism in India, it's very, very famous. India only got its independence after the war, the Second World War. Before that, it was colonized by the British. the British have colonized a lot of the land and they shall subjugate it and put their own values onto other people, basically. I think we have learned by our mistake that colonialism was really bad in that sense. And I was like prepping for this talk, I've read a lot about colonialism, and I actually found out that there's many different colonialisms in the world. There are different ways to colonize someone's land. The types of colonialism are the settler colonialism, the exploitation colonialism, the plantation colonialism, the surrogate colonialism, and the internal colonialism. So basically, these are 5. So basically, all these types of colonialism are different in how they manifest, and they're all very interesting. So the settler one, it's basically one of the most common form of colonial conquest, where the settler colonialism describes the migration of large group of people from one country to another to build permanent, self-supporting settlements, remaining legal subjects of their native country. The colonialists harvest natural resources and attempt to either drive the indigenous people away or force them to assimilate peacefully into colonial life. This is one of the main type of colonialisms. This is what people did. And to some extent, I can recognize that this is a little bit of what Western people are doing in Bali. They're not doing it in the same way, but so basically, for those that don't really understand what's going on in Bali, Bali is an extremely beautiful place, a paradise. Bali is green and it's warm all the time, and people love living there. It's also spiritual. It has a community for everything and everyone, and it's a place where people feel like they belong. I feel like I belong there. And the very first time that I arrived in Bali, it was 2018, and I felt like there was no place like Bali. There was like no place with other people like myself that were digital nomads, that were exploring the world, that were feeling this fire to create something, to do something more with their lives. And I fell in love. This is the reality of it. I fell in love with the place. And for many, many years, I went back and then I stayed longer. First, I stayed 2 months, and I stayed 4 months, and I stayed 6 months, and eventually I stayed 8 months this year. And I've decided to build a house for myself, a house for my business, and a place that I can call home, because I love the culture so much. I love the people so much, and I want to be amongst them. And whether this may sound like a great thing, and it's a beautiful thing, I've also been really, really eaten by guilt, because what I am doing, and I'm not the only one, there's a lot of people that are doing the same as I am doing with way less awareness of what they're doing, is basically colonizing. We are moving there long term. Prices are going up for the locals. That is called gentrification. A lot of the locals are moving out and out because they can no longer afford to live in the city or wherever they were living before, because prices are going up, because now a lot of people are coming with a lot more money than what the locals can afford. And so we as Westerners come, we build these beautiful villas who are Western standards, who have nothing to do with the locals. They're not for the locals, they're just built by the locals. So sometimes they're not even built by the locals, they're built by people from Java or Lombok or neighboring islands. And they make a business, they rent it out to tourists because, again, the locals cannot afford to pay those prices. And they live an amazing life. There's businesses some of the businesses are still run by locals, but more businesses are more and more run by Westerners. We have created in Canggu a whole city for Western people, basically, where locals cannot afford to sit at the restaurants. They cannot afford to pay for things. And that stopped me and got me thinking, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And is this bad? So the only thing that we're not doing according to what I've just read as a settler, is that we're still under Indonesian rule. We're still tourists, basically. I'm a tourist in Bali. I consider myself a tourist. I'm definitely not a local. And I am subjugated to Indonesian rule. I do not come there with Italian laws, basically. And we're all from different places, so we do not come from like an imperialistic view where we want to conquer the world and impose our values. We just want to have a better life. We're immigrants. That's what we are. And I think we should humble ourselves down to the fact that we look at Bali and we're immigrants. We're emigrating from our countries and we're immigrating into another country. And we're looking for a better life. My life standard in Bali is way, way higher than the life that I can have back home. And this is what happens with a lot of immigrants. Immigrants move from one place to the other. I personally believe in a borderless world where you don't have borders, where you don't need to check passports. Of course, I have passport privilege. So for me, the world is already kind of borderless because I can enter most places without a visa. For a lot of people, that's not the case, unfortunately. So I don't see it happening very soon. I do think I am very passport privileged, and therefore I can travel the world and I can sit here and do a podcast and say the reasons why I love Bali and I want to live in Bali so much. But the reality is that's not available to everyone. And so I think being aware of the privileges that we have is extremely, extremely important. And when it comes to Bali, I think it's really important to sit down and think, are we imposing our values on other people? Are we going there for what reason? Because we love it so much or because we have the services? Are we being fair to the population? Are we exploiting the population or are we helping the population? Because a lot of us think that we as tourists, we help the population because a lot of the population is employed in the tourist industry and they do survive thanks to tourism. But is that really good? Is it fair to build a house on the other side of the world, which I want to make my house and for my business and not for the locals? Or better, I will try to bring in the locals as much as possible. They're building my house. I'm surrounded by only local people. I'm only using local labor force. However, am I still exploiting them? These are all questions that I think we as Westerners that go and decide, we as digital nomads that go and decide to live in other countries should always ask ourselves. Because I can already see the damage in Bali. There were rice fields, and now they're not rice fields anymore. A lot of Russian people are coming with a lot of money and building literally neighborhoods, towns, villages just for Russian in Bali. Is that good or is that bad? I see a lot of us coming and imposing our Western values in a place that does not have Western values. And maybe they're not okay with Western values and they're okay with their values and they want to keep them and preserve them. Are we eliminating their culture because we are coming in with a way stronger culture and with a lot of fucking money? Are we buying the place out? And what can we do to limit the damage that we're doing? I don't have an answer necessarily. I don't have an answer to all of this, but I am humbling and sitting here with all of you to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Is this okay? And what can we do? I'm starting this conversation because obviously I'm guilty of it. I am guilty of all of them in my past, in my present, and maybe in my future. But I'm also just a human that really loves a place, found a place that wants to call home, that really feels like I finally belong there and I want a better life. Is that wrong? And so within all of this is a huge framework. In all of this, I ask all of you to come and sit with me and stop and think for a second. Is this digital nomadism actually a problem, or is a new lifestyle? And what can we do to make this new lifestyle more sustainable, this new lifestyle less disrupting to local culture, this new lifestyle less of imposing and more of receiving? Because I think it's a second that it goes from I want to explore a place that I love so much to I'm exploiting a place that I love so much. And the second form of colonialism here, it's called exploitation. And here it says that exploitation colonialism describes the use of force to control another country for purposes of exploiting its population as labor and its natural resources as raw material. So that's not exactly what people are doing in Bali, but we are exploiting the beautiful rice fields and the beautiful places that you can find in Bali to serve our own interests. And here it says like we enslave the local people. And I would like to stop for a second and think, are we enslaving the local people in Bali? Do they have a choice to work somewhere else? They do. They do have a choice. However, not that much. And so a lot of them are forced to work in tourist industry to make a living. They don't have to do that, but that's 90% of their economy. That's mostly what if they want to make a living, what they have to do. So it is still a choice, but it's not entirely a choice. The third type of colonialism is plantation colonialism. Plantation colonialism was an early method of colonialization in which settlers undertake the mass production of a single crop, such as cotton, tobacco, coffee, or whatever, sugar. In many cases, an underlying purpose of the plantation colonies was to impose Western culture and religion on nearby indigenous people. So yeah, they go one place, they grow the crops, and they take it back to their motherlands, basically. And they use the people, and they take it back. We don't do it specifically. We don't do it like that in Bali, but we do it with money. We go there. There's a lot of opportunities to make money in Bali. And we go, we exploit the land, we exploit the people, we make a lot of money, and we bring it back home. Sometimes we spend it there. I myself, living in Bali, will spend the money there, will pay the taxes there, at least giving back something. But a lot of other people don't. Just exploit the place to make money and then take the money out. The second to last type of colonialism is called surrogate. In surrogate colonialism, a foreign power encourages and supports, either openly or covertly, the settlement of a non-native group on territory occupied by an indigenous population. So this does not happen in Bali. However, corruption and the actual Indonesian government is encouraging foreigners to settle there. All of this can happen because the Indonesian government is allowing this. They should put laws, and I hope they will very soon. Otherwise, Bali will be destroyed, really, and the rice field will be gone in like no time. They should put some limitation to how much people can build, to how many businesses people can start. Because the reality is, a lot of people are selling. People are selling their land. The Balinese people are selling their lands because they can see an opportunity to make a lot of money. Or maybe because they're forced to sell so that they can actually make a living because the prices are going up. However, the Indonesian government is enabling, is allowing all of this. So it's not a foreign power right now. It's an Indonesian power, and the Indonesian government that is allowing all of this to happen. And the last, it's called internal colonialism. And internal colonialism describes the oppression or exploitation of one racial or ethnic group by another within the same country. In contrast to traditional types of colonialism, the source comes from within the country rather than from a foreign power. The term internal colonialism is often used to explain the discriminatory treatment of Mexicans in the United States after the Mexican-American War. As a result of the war, many Mexicans who had been living in what is now the southwestern United States became subjects of the U.S. government but without the rights and freedoms associated with US citizenship. So this is not really happening in Bali as of now, but it is happening in many other parts of the world. The last one is called internal colonialism. So as I said, I'm here to discuss something that it's really taboo because it's very hard to talk about. Me as an Italian person, my people have colonized so many places in the past. Me as a person who holds an Israeli passport, with the whole war, it's now in the midst of really, there are all these talks about, is Israel a colonizing force or not? Is Zionism colonizing force or not? This is a huge debate, maybe for another podcast session. I have tackled the conflict before, and I don't want to go into it right now because it's really heavy. But a lot of people are. Israel, Zionism, Zionists are a colonizing force. People say Zionists are a colonizing force. They move from one country to another where there were already indigenous people there, and they conquered the land, and they have made settlements. Some people described only the West Bank with literally people called settlers. I call people in the West Bank settlers. A lot of people don't accept this term because they say they're not settlers, they're still native people that only went back to their motherland. But I, for example, call them settlers because they are Israeli people living in the West Bank. This is a very complicated issue, but more than this, what really is troubling me and what really is making me feel so much guilt is the situation in Bali. Because Balinese people are amazing. They have an amazing land. And this is what I love so much. This is why I want to live there. But I ask myself every single day that I'm there, is this right or is this wrong? And it's important to ask ourselves these questions because it all starts from here, because sometimes it is wrong. And if it is wrong, we can do something to make it better. I don't know if there's a way to make our situation better. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but being aware is the first step to solving something. So I do hope that all of us will sit together and think really what it is that we're doing as Western people in these Asian countries. And if there is anything that we can do to make the situation better, or if to eventually leave them alone and get the fuck out. So with all that said, was everything. This was it for this week's podcast session. Thank you all for listening. If you have any comments or anything that you want to say, please let me know in the comment section down below. This is a personal story and a personal experience. Do not take this as facts. I will link what I've been reading about colonialism, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.